In the afternoon of August 26, 1974, the world watched in disbelief as one of Africa's most feared leaders, Idi Amin Dada, made the strangest announcement in Africa's political history. Known for his flamboyance, brutality, and bizarre displays of power, Amin had always been a man of extremes, but nothing prepared the public for what he said next. On that day, during a pre-recorded national radio broadcast, Amin publicly declared that he had decided to divorce 3 of his 5 wives all at once, leaving only Medina and Sarah Kiolaba as his official wives. The announcement stunned the Ugandan public and the international press, not only because of the abruptness of the decision, but also because Amin justified it by claiming that some of his wives had allegedly been unfaithful or involved in plots against him. In the days that followed, soldiers reportedly raided the homes of the divorced wives, and one of them was later imprisoned. The event became one of the most talked about scandals of Amin's rule, reinforcing his reputation as both unpredictable and ruthlessly controlling, even in his personal life. By the time of Idi Amin's death in August of 2003, he was a lonely man, abandoned by all his wives and close relatives, despite living lavishly and surrounded by women during his reign. He faded into obscurity, stripped of power and influence. Confined to a small apartment and dependent on the Saudi government's charity, Amin's health deteriorated from kidney failure. Few visited him, and even his surviving family kept their distance. The man who once ruled with terror and excess died quietly, uncelebrated, unloved, and abandoned by his multiple wives. In this video, we shall take a deep dive into the untold story of Idi Amin's wives, how he treated them, and why they eventually abandoned him. This is the untold story of Idi Amin's wives, the first ladies of Uganda in the 70s. Idi Amin Dada, the self-proclaimed conqueror of the British Empire and ruler of Uganda from 1971 to 1979, was a man of contradictions. Charismatic yet cruel, jovial yet terrifying, charming yet unpredictable. His relationships with women reflected the same traits that defined his rule: domination, control, and an insatiable hunger for power. Over his lifetime, Amin married at least 5 wives, though some reports suggest he had more, with some sources stating up to 9. Each marriage revealed a different side of his personality, from his days as a young soldier to his years as a feared dictator. Idi Amin loved women and enjoyed their company. He always claimed men were polygamous in nature, and that it was not normal for a man to be with one woman. His first wife, Malyamu, was the woman who knew him before fame, before power, before the bloodshed. Malyamu was from the Kakwa ethnic group, like Amin himself, and their marriage began when he was still a low-ranking officer in the King's African Rifles of the British Colonial Army in the late 1950s. Malyamu was beautiful, loyal, and deeply traditional. The perfect match for a man with big dreams but humble origins. Together, they had several children, including a son, Taban Amin, who would later become a military officer and serve in various Ugandan governments. Malyamu endured the early struggles of Amin's life, moving with him from barracks to barracks, watching him rise through the ranks. But once he seized power in 1971, the loving husband she once knew began to disappear. Amin grew arrogant, and their marriage began to crumble under the weight of his infidelity and violent temper. Amin became physically aggressive towards her and didn't want her to keep male company. In 1974, Malyamu was one of the women Idi Amin announced on national radio that he would be divorcing. After the announcement, she was briefly arrested and accused of illegal dealings and plot against her husband. She later fled to Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then to Kenya. Amin's second wife, Adroa, was a strong and independent woman, an education officer, and one of the few who dared to challenge him intellectually. She came into his life during the 1960s, when he was already known as a rising star in the Ugandan army. Kay was different from the others, educated, opinionated, and sophisticated. Their relationship was passionate but volatile. Amin admired her intelligence but detested her independence. He detested the fact that she could challenge him and held him accountable. Together, they had one son, Faisal Wangita, who later made headlines for his brushes with the law in the United Kingdom. When Amin became president, Kay initially lived a life of privilege, but she soon fell out of favor. Rumors circulated that she had criticized his rule or been unfaithful, accusations that in Amin's court could mean imprisonment or death. After his 1974 radio broadcast announcing the divorce of 3 wives, Kay was arrested and detained. She was later released, but remained under surveillance. She spent much of her later life away from the public eye, scarred by the trauma of her marriage to a man who had once been her protector, but became her oppressor. His 3rd wife, Norah Amin, entered his life as a symbol of his growing appetite for control and admiration. Norah was stunningly beautiful and came from a respectable family. She married Amin in the late 1960s, when he was already a powerful military figure. To the public, she was elegant and composed. To Amin, she was another jewel in his crown. Their marriage produced several children, though the exact number is unclear. Yet behind the facade of glamour, Norah's life was far from peaceful. Amin's jealousy, paranoia, and violent outbursts made life in the presidential household unbearable. Norah eventually fell out of favor, accused of infidelity, a claim Amin used as justification for publicly divorcing her in 1974. Afterward, her home was raided by soldiers, and she reportedly fled into hiding, terrified for her life. Her fate after Amin's fall remains largely unknown, another victim of his tyranny disguised as marital authority. Amin's 4th wife, Medina Amin, was said to be his favorite for a time. Young, gentle, and obedient, she came from a Muslim family and was deeply religious, qualities that appealed to Amin's own Islamic identity. He married her in the early 1970s, after consolidating power as Uganda's president. Medina bore him several children and lived a relatively peaceful life compared to his other wives, at least for a while. She avoided political talk, rarely appeared in public, and kept to domestic affairs, which suited Amin's controlling nature. Those who knew the family described her as soft-spoken and deeply loyal. But even Medina could not escape the turbulence of Amin's world. As rumors of infidelity and betrayal swirled around the presidential mansion, she too faced emotional abuse and constant scrutiny. After Amin fled Uganda in 1979, she lived with him in exile in Saudi Arabia, caring for him during his later years until his death in 2003. His 5th wife, Sarah Kiolaba, was perhaps the most publicly known and controversial. She was a dancer with the Revolutionary Suicide Mechanized Regiment Band of the Uganda Army. And much younger than Amin, nearly 20 years his junior, Sarah captured Amin's attention during one of his flamboyant public events. Their wedding in 1975 was a spectacle that reflected Amin's theatrical personality. It was held during the Organization of African Unity Summit in Kampala, attended by hundreds of dignitaries and broadcast live on national television. Sarah became known as the Queen of Uganda, often photographed beside Amin in lavish dresses, smiling for the cameras. Together, they had several children, including Jafar Amin, who later became one of his most vocal defenders. But Sarah's fairy tale life soon turned dark. Behind closed doors, she endured Amin's growing instability, his violent rages, and the collapse of his regime. When he was overthrown in 1979, she fled with him to Libya and later to Saudi Arabia, where they lived under strict conditions imposed by the Saudi government. She remained with him and later left to settle in London, where she lived quietly until her own death in 2015. In total, Idi Amin fathered more than 40 children with his wives and mistresses. His children grew up in privilege, but also in fear. Some were used as symbols of propaganda. Others were hidden away to protect them from their father's wrath or political enemies. Idi Amin, one of his eldest sons, later said that life as Idi Amin's child was both a blessing and a curse. They had everything they wanted, yet they lived under constant fear of being used or punished for their father's paranoia. Amin's treatment of his wives and children mirrored his rule over Uganda. Absolute control, no tolerance for dissent, and unpredictable cruelty masked by charm. He demanded loyalty above all else. He could be affectionate one moment and terrifyingly violent the next. His palace was filled with luxury, imported cars, gold-plated decorations, and lavish banquets, but it was also haunted by fear. None of his wives could ever feel truly safe. Even his children knew that their father's moods could change with the wind. Idi Amin's management of his wives reflected the same dictatorial nature that defined his rule over Uganda: total control, fear, and unpredictable affection. Behind the high walls of his palaces in Kampala and Entebbe, life for his 5 wives was carefully structured around his moods, whims, and ego. Amin treated marriage not as a union of love, but as an extension of his authority. Each wife had a specific role and function, and he rotated his attention among them as though managing a royal court. He expected absolute obedience, loyalty, and silence. The women lived in separate residences within the presidential compounds, each assigned servants and guards, but all under close surveillance by Amin's intelligence officers. He trusted no one completely, not even the women he claimed to love. Amin would summon one wife at a time to spend the night with him, often according to a fixed rotation schedule, though this could change depending on his mood or preference. Sometimes he would host lavish dinners, where all his wives were required to attend, dressed elegantly, smiling for the cameras as the happy family of the president. In public, he liked to present himself as a devout Muslim and a family man blessed by God, but in private, jealousy and suspicion ruled his home. He feared betrayal, not just from political enemies, but from his own wives. His insecurity made him paranoid about infidelity. He often accused his wives of flirting with male guests or talking to bodyguards. Even a simple glance from one of his wives to another man could provoke his fury. Those accused of disloyalty faced harsh punishment, including confinement, interrogation, or even execution of those suspected of aiding them. Despite the fear, there were moments of strange normalcy. Amin would sometimes gather all his wives and children for outings at Lake Victoria or host family banquets filled with music, food, and laughter. He enjoyed being surrounded by his family, using them as props to portray an image of a benevolent ruler. He could be playful, telling jokes or showering his wives with gifts, jewelry, imported clothes, or even cars. But this affection was fleeting. It often vanished as quickly as it appeared. Whenever he felt slighted or insecure, he turned cold and violent. His wives learned to compete quietly for his favor. They dressed to impress him, praised him endlessly, and avoided anything that could be seen as defiance. Some even turned against each other, feeding Amin with gossip to gain his trust. The palace atmosphere was tense, love mixed with fear, luxury laced with danger. His insecurity deepened as his regime grew more brutal. The more power he gained, the more suspicious he became. He changed bodyguards frequently, bugged the bedrooms of his wives, and sometimes sent soldiers to spy on them secretly. By the mid-1970s, his paranoia had consumed his household. The public divorce of 3 of his wives in 1974 was a dramatic sign of how unstable his private life had become. Amin's household, once filled with laughter and opulence, became a prison of suspicion. He ruled his family as he ruled Uganda, through fear, control, and intimidation. Idi Amin's tyrannical rule over Uganda ended dramatically in April 1979 after 8 years of brutality, paranoia, and economic collapse. His downfall began in late 1978 when he made the reckless decision to invade Tanzania, claiming a border dispute around the Kagera region. This act of aggression provoked the full wrath of Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere, who had long opposed Amin's violent dictatorship. In response, Tanzania launched a counter-offensive with the support of Ugandan exiles determined to remove Amin from power. The Tanzanian People's Defense Force, joined by the Uganda National Liberation Front, advanced rapidly into Ugandan territory. Amin's army, once feared for its ruthlessness, was now disorganized, demoralized, and plagued by defections. By April 1979, Tanzanian troops had reached Kampala, the Ugandan capital. On April 11th, they captured the city after fierce fighting, while Amin fled in disguise to Libya, abandoning his soldiers and loyalists. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, a former ally, briefly sheltered him before sending him to Saudi Arabia, where the Saudi royal family granted him asylum on the condition that he stayed out of politics. From there, Amin lived in obscurity for the rest of his life. In the aftermath of his fall, Ugandans uncovered horrifying evidence of the atrocities committed during his reign. Mass graves, torture chambers, and the remains of thousands of victims. The economy was in ruins. The educated elite had fled, and the nation was traumatized. Amin's fall marked not only the end of one of Africa's most infamous dictatorships, but also a moment of painful reckoning for Uganda. The once boastful conqueror of the British Empire, who paraded in medals and titles, died decades later in exile, a forgotten and powerless man, symbolizing the ultimate collapse of tyranny and excess. By the end of his life, when Amin was living in exile in Saudi Arabia, the women who once surrounded him were gone. The man who once commanded armies, ruled a nation, and claimed endless adoration, died with only one of his wives, Medina, by his side. His other wives had fled or vanished into quiet obscurity. His children were scattered across continents, carrying a legacy they did not choose. Idi Amin, who had once believed he could control everything, from a country to the women in his life, died powerless and forgotten. A tragic reminder that no amount of domination can secure love or loyalty. His marriages, like his regime, were built on fear, and in the end, that fear consumed everything he ever claimed to possess.